At my granddaughter's wedding, I expected joy, love, and maybe a few happy tears. Instead, I got a name tag that cut deeper than any knife. The old gal footing the bill. I'm sharing this story to see how far it travels. Drop the city you're reading from in the comments below. I'm Margaret Thompson, 67, widowed for 4 years since my husband, James, passed from leukemia. That morning, I took my time getting ready for Sarah's big day. I slipped into a soft lavender dress James always said brought out my eyes, pinned my grey hair into a neat bun, and spritzed on the perfume he bought me for our 40th anniversary. Standing in front of the mirror, I whispered, "You'd be proud, James," imagining his warm smile. The ceremony at Grace Episcopal Church in Charleston was picture perfect. Sarah glowed in her white gown, her father, my son David, grinning ear to ear as he walked her down the aisle. Even my daughter-in-law, Karen, dabbed at her eyes, caught up in the moment. For a while, it felt like the family celebration I had dreamed of. Then came the reception at the Magnolia Hall, a swanky venue with chandeliers and polished wood floors. At the check-in table, a young woman handed me my name tag with a bright smile. "Here you go, Mrs. Thompson." I glanced at it, expecting Margaret Thompson, grandmother of the bride. Instead, in fancy script, it read, "The old gal footing the bill." My stomach dropped. "Is this right?" I asked, my voice tight. The woman's smile faltered as she peeked at the tag. "Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me check for another one." I waved her off, not wanting to make a fuss on Sarah's day. "It's fine. I'll sort it out with my family." Pinning the tag to my dress felt like swallowing glass, but I walked into the ballroom, head high, even as humiliation burned in my chest. "Who did this?" "Sarah, David, Karen." During the cocktail hour, I mingled, forcing smiles as guests either ignored the tag or avoided my eyes. Then I overheard a snippet of conversation that stopped me cold. "Did you see Margaret's name tag?" a woman murmured, giggling. Karen said it was a hoot, called her the cash cow. Another voice chimed in, "Yeah, David said she's loaded since James left her everything." I stepped away, my hands trembling, pretending I hadn't heard. David spotted me then, waving me over to a group of guests. "Mom, come meet the Wilsons. You remember Tom, Dad's old fishing buddy?" I joined them, my name tag screaming in my peripheral vision. "This is my mom, Margaret," David said, then chuckled. "Our family's personal bank, right, Mom?" Tom Wilson shifted uncomfortably, his wife offering a weak smile. "Margaret Thompson," I said firmly, shaking their hands. "James's widow." Tom nodded kindly. "James always bragged about you, said you were the heart of the family." I barely registered the rest of their small talk. Excusing myself, I pulled David aside. "What's with this?" I pointed to the tag, my voice low but sharp. He laughed it off. "Come on, Mom, it's just a joke. Everyone knows you're the one bankrolling this shindig." Karen sauntered over, all smiles in her sleek mother of the bride dress. "Margaret, you're a star for making this happen. We're just having a little fun." Their laughter grated like nails on a chalkboard. Needing air, I slipped into the hallway, where an older man in a sharp suit approached. "Margaret." "It's Paul Carter, James's lawyer." His eyes fixed to my name tag, his jaw tightening. "That's not right," he said quietly. "And we talk." We stepped into a quiet corner, and he pulled an envelope from his jacket. James added a codicil to his will before he passed. "I wasn't supposed to show you unless it came to this." I opened it, my fingers unsteady. The legal jargon boiled down to one bombshell. Any family member who publicly disrespected me would lose their inheritance, a fortune far larger than I'd realized. "Why keep this from me?" I asked, stunned. Paul sighed. "James wanted them to treat you right out of love, not fear of losing money." I glanced back at the ballroom, when my family laughed and danced oblivious. What now? Paul asked. I handed him the envelope, my resolve hardening. Nothing yet. I need to know who they really are. Back at the reception, the name tag didn't sting as much. It wasn't shame weighing on me anymore, it was clarity. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table in my robe, staring at that cursed name tag. You'd have hated this. James, I murmured, picturing his quiet strength. Maybe my family had changed, or maybe I'd just been blind to their true colors. Either way, I wasn't at ATM anymore. I was Margaret Thompson, and I was done playing their game. I wandered into the living room, my gaze settling on the family portrait above the mantel. It was taken 6 years ago at our 35th anniversary party, back when James was still healthy, his laugh filling the room. I stood beside him, my hand resting on his arm, with our son David and his wife Karen on either side. Our grandchildren, Sarah and Ethan, then just teens, grinned in front. We looked like a family united, happy. When had that changed? The question gnawed at me as I brewed my morning coffee, the silence of the house amplifying my thoughts. Maybe the shift was so slow I didn't notice until it was too late. The first red flag came a year after James's death. David and Karen invited me to dinner at their place, a rare gesture. Over a roast chicken, they were all warmth, asking about my health, sharing memories of James. Then, over apple pie, David cleared his throat. Mom, we've been thinking about sprucing up the house. New flooring, maybe a deck. Nothing crazy. Karen chimed in, her smug practice. With the kids' college costs, things are tight. We thought you might want to help out, since James left you so comfortable. I wrote them a $25,000 check that night, thinking it was a one-time thing. That was just the start. Requests snowballed. New flooring became a full home makeover. College helped turn into flashy cars for Sarah and Ethan when they hit 18. Family trips to Aspen or the Outer Banks. I was invited, but the bill always landed in my lap. I dragged a box of bank statements from the study closet and sat cross-legged on the rug, sifting through years of proof. In 4 years, I'd given David and Karen over $200,000. The numbers stared back at me, cold and undeniable. The phone buzzed, snapping me out of my fog. It was Karen. Margaret, you home? They've been texting. My phone was still in my purse from the wedding. I'm here, I said. Everything okay? Oh, absolutely, she purred. We just wanted to say thanks for making Sarah's wedding so perfect. She and Ryan are over the moon. I gripped the phone, remembering the $40,000 I'd shelled out for the venue and catering. Glad I could help, I said, my tone neutral. Actually, Karen continued, her voice syrupy. Ryan's parents were supposed to cover the honeymoon, but his dad's business took a hit. Sarah's heartbroken. They've got their sights set on a week in Hawaii. We chip in, of course, but with the wedding costs she trailed off. The implication clear. They'd spent nothing, my money had covered it all. I'll consider it, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. A pause hung on the line. Oh, well, they need to book soon for decent rates, Karen pressed. I'll let you know tomorrow, I said and hung up, my heart pounding. James used to warn me about David. He thinks money fixes everything, he'd say, shaking his head. But it just masks the cracks. I hadn't listened or hadn't wanted to. A knock at the door startled me. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan, my 20-year-old grandson, shifting on the porch. I shoved the bank statements back into the box and opened the door. Grandma! He wrapped me in a hug, tall and lanky like James, with the same gentle eyes. You okay? They've been texting. I'm fine. Just tired from yesterday, I said, leading him to the kitchen. I set the coffee maker going again. Ethan had always been different, quiet, thoughtful, less caught up in the family's obsession with status. I'm sorry about the wedding, he said, sitting at the counter. That name tag, the way they talked it was wrong. My throat tightened. You saw it. Everyone did. he said, looking ashamed. I should have spoken up. I reached across the counter, squeezing his hand. It's not your job to fix your parents' mistakes. He met my eyes. They've changed since Grandpa died. Or maybe I just didn't notice before. All they talk about is your money. Last week, I heard Dad say this house is too big for you alone. Said they could help you downsize. The words hit like a punch. I poured coffee, using the moment to steady myself. Paul Carter's envelope flashed in my mind the codicil to James's will, disinheriting anyone who disrespected me. They were eyeing my home now, too. You sure you're okay, Grandma? Ethan asked. I smiled. A plan forming. I'm clearer than I've been in years, Ethan. Things are going to change. We sipped coffee, and I studied him, wondering if he was truly different or just biding his time like the others. 4 days later, David and Karen hosted a post-wedding brunch at the Riverwood Country Club. I debated skipping it but wanted to test if the name tag was a one-off or part of a pattern. Dressed in a tailored ivory blazer James used to call it my power suit, I walked into the club's dining room. Sarah and Ryan were there, along with Ethan, some cousins, and Ryan's parents. Mom, over here, David called, gesturing to a table where I was seated next to Ryan's parents, strangers to me, instead of my grandkids. Heron, in a dress that screamed money, gave me a quick hug. You look nice, Margaret, she said, her tone hinting at surprise. The brunch was pleasant until Karen tapped her glass for a toast. Thank you all for making Sarah and Ryan's wedding unforgettable, she said, beaming. And a huge thanks to Grandma Margaret for her incredible generosity. Eyes turned to me, and I felt the familiar weight of their expectations. In fact, Karen continued, her smile tight. Margaret's kindly offered to fund Sarah and Ryan's dream honeymoon in Hawaii. The room clapped lightly. I set my fork down, my pulse steady. That's news to me, I said calmly. Sarah flushed. Ryan stared at his plate, and David jumped in. Mom, we talked yesterday, remember? You said you'd think about it. I did, I replied, my voice even. And I'm still thinking. Silence blanketed the table. Karen's laugh was sharp, forced. Well, we'll sort it out later. But I wasn't sorting anything, not until I knew who my family really was. David leaned in, his voice a loud whisper meant for the whole table. Mom, don't make a scene. We already told Sarah and Ryan they could book the trip. Something inside me broke, a thread stretched too thin for too long. I straightened in my chair, my voice clear and steady. I don't recall agreeing to pay for Hawaii. In fact, I thought Ryan's parents were covering it. Ryan's father, Tom, shifted in his seat, muttering, business hasn't been great lately. I nodded kindly. I understand, Tom. Things happen, but it's not right to volunteer someone else's money in public without asking, is it? The table went quiet. Karen's face turned crimson. Maybe Sarah and Ryan could plan a honeymoon they can afford, I added, my tone calm but firm. Karen's eyes flashed. What about your money? Everyone knows James left you plenty. Her words dripped with entitlement, and in that moment, my path became crystal clear. My finances aren't up for public debate, I said, my voice like steel. And neither are my decisions. David grabbed my arm, his grip tight. Mom, stop it. You're embarrassing us. I pulled free, meeting his eyes. No, David, you've embarrassed yourselves. I stood, smoothing my blazer. Sarah, Ryan, I wish you all the happiness in the world. I'd be glad to help with a reasonable honeymoon, but we'll discuss it privately. Ethan stood too. I'll walk you out, Grandma. In the quiet of the country club's lobby, my hands shook as I fumbled for my keys. You okay to drive? Ethan asked, his voice soft. I nodded, taking a deep breath. I'm fine, just rattled. You were amazing back there, he said, his eyes so like James's it hurt. That took guts. I smiled faintly. Come over for dinner tonight? He grinned. Wouldn't miss it. That evening, over a simple meal of grilled salmon and salad, I opened up to Ethan about the past 4 years, David and Karen's endless requests, the way respect had eroded since James died. I'm not surprised, Ethan said, his voice heavy. After Grandpa passed, it's like they saw you as I don't know. A bank account. I altered. He nodded, looking guilty. It's getting worse. Last week, I overheard them talking about your house again. Dad said it's too much for one person, and they could help you move to Pine Grove, that retirement place. Said the housing market's hot, and they could manage the sale for you. My stomach churned. Our house was a sanctuary, every corner filled with memories of James. They weren't just after my money, they wanted my home. Ethan, I said, deciding to trust him, there's something you need to know about your grandfather's will. The doorbell cut me off. Through the window, I saw David's SUV in the driveway. Ethan's jaw tightened. You don't have to let him in, Mo, I said, standing. It's time to face this. I opened the door to David, his face red with anger. What was that stunt at brunch? He snapped, brushing past me into the foyer. He froze when he saw Ethan. What are you doing here? Having dinner with Grandma, Ethan said evenly. You should try it sometime without asking for a check. David's eyes narrowed. This doesn't concern you, Ethan. This is between me and Mom. No, I said firmly. Ethan says, I'm done with your behind closed doors games, David. Let's get everything out in the open. David paced the living room, his voice rising. You've got some nerve, Mom, making a scene at brunch, and now you're turning Ethan against us. I settled into James's old leather chair, hands clasped. Ethan leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, watching his father with quiet intensity. No one's turning anyone against you, I said. We're just calling out what's been happening since James died. And what's that supposed to mean? David demanded. Ethan spoke before I could. You and Mom treat Grandma like a cash machine, not a person. That name tag at the wedding, announcing she'd pay for the honeymoon without asking. Talking about selling her house behind her back. David's face flushed. You've been eavesdropping. I've been paying attention. Ethan shot back. Something you could learn to do. David turned to me, his tone shifting to that familiar wheedling charm. Mom, you're taking this all wrong. We're just looking out for you. You're not getting any younger. And managing all that money James left. I'm 67, David, not 97. I cut in. My mind's sharp, and I'm perfectly capable of handling my own affairs. But Dad left you so much. Stop. I raised a hand. James left me what he intended. It's not a family ATM. David's charm vanished. So that's it. You're cutting us off because of one dumb name tag. I'm saying I'm done letting you make my choices for me. If Sarah and Ryan want a honeymoon, they can save for it. If you and Karen want a bigger house, earn it. David stared as if I'd spoken in tongues. Then he turned to Ethan. I need to talk to Mom alone. I'm staying, Ethan said, his voice firm. This is family business, and I'm family. Something flickered in David's eyes, calculation, maybe panic. He'd always swayed me in private, playing on my grief, my need to keep the peace. But with Ethan there, his tricks fell flat. Fine, he snapped, heading for the door. This isn't over, Mom. After he left, Ethan exhaled. I'm sorry, Grandma. For what? I asked, crossing to hug him. You've done nothing wrong. For not speaking up sooner. For letting them treat you like this. You're speaking up now, I said, squeezing his shoulders. That's what counts. After Ethan left, I sat in the quiet of my home, James's presence lingering in every corner. Had we missed something with David? Had that entitlement always been there, hidden? More importantly, what now? The answer took shape slowly, like fog lifting. I wouldn't wave the codicil in their faces. That would only make them fake respect out of fear. Instead, I'd let them show their true selves while I took back my life. The next morning, I called Paul Carter. "Margaret, I've been expecting you," he said warmly. "After that wedding fiasco, I figured you'd have questions." I told him about the brunch and David's visit. "I need to know everything about James's will, Paul, not just the codicil, the whole thing." "Let's do this in person," he said. "Can you come by the office this afternoon?" 3 hours later, I sat in Paul's sleek office as he laid out James's estate. The numbers made my head spin. James built and sold 2 businesses at the right time, Paul explained. His investments were rock solid, designed to weather any storm. "You're more than comfortable, Margaret." I knew we were set, I said, dazed. "But this James was private about money," Paul said with a smile. "He always said you loved him when he was just a guy with a rusty Ford and big dreams. He didn't want you turning into one of those country club types, chasing status." I laughed, hearing James's voice in those words. "That's him, all right." As for the codicil, Paul continued, "It's ironclad. Anyone who publicly disrespects you loses their inheritance. The name tag, the brunch stunt, those qualify. But you don't have to decide anything now." I nodded, the weight of it settling in. "I'm not ready to pull the trigger yet, Paul. I need to see how far they'll go." He leaned back, studying me. "James would be proud of you, Margaret. You're tougher than you look." I smiled, feeling it for the first time in years. "I'm learning that myself." Paul leaned forward, his eyes sharp with interest. "The codicil stays in place for your lifetime, Margaret. But if you want to make changes to your own will or how your assets are handled, that's entirely possible. What's on your mind?" By the time I left Paul's office, I had a plan, not a dramatic showdown, but a quiet reclaiming of my life. First, I called my old friend Susan, who I hadn't seen much since James died. We set lunch for the next day at a cozy cafe downtown. Then I stopped by the community center and grabbed a flyer for their art workshops. James always urged me to try watercolor painting, and it felt like the right time to start. At home, I sat at my desk, researching small business grants. Ethan had mentioned his dream of opening a bookstore after college, but worried about the costs. Supporting his vision felt like a meaningful way to use some of my resources. When my phone buzzed with Karen's name, I let it go to voicemail. The old Margaret would have picked up, braced for the next emergency or demand. "Not anymore." Karen's message was predictable. "Margaret, it's Karen. David told me about last night. Sounds like a big misunderstanding. We only want what's best for you. Let's have dinner this weekend to sort things out. Oh, and Sarah mentioned you might be open to helping with the honeymoon. They need to book soon for the best rates." For me, I deleted it without a second thought. Instead, I pulled out my checkbook and wrote a modest check for Sarah and Ryan's wedding gift, enough for a charming getaway to the Smoky Mountains, not Hawaii. I tucked it into a card with a heartfelt note wishing them joy, then sealed the envelope. My strategy was simple. No arguments, no ultimatums, just firm boundaries. James would have nodded in approval. 6 months flew by, filled with small but powerful changes. I signed up for watercolor classes at the community center, reconnected with Susan and other friends, and spent more time with Ethan, who visited often. I gave him a small loan for his bookstore business plan, which was taking shape beautifully, a quaint shop with a cafe corner, already generating buzz at his college. David and Karen, meanwhile, swung between cold distance and desperate attempts to regain their grip on my wallet. When silence didn't work, they'd show up with forced smiles, steering conversations to money, a kitchen upgrade, Sarah and Ryan's house hunting, their own retirement worries. Each time, I deflected with a calm, "I'm handling my finances." Their frustration grew. Karen's texts turned sharp, David's calls more insistent, but I found strength in my quiet resolve. Today was my 68th birthday, and despite my protests, Ethan insisted on a small family gathering at my house. "They need to remember this is your home," he said, his determination so like James's. I spent the morning in my garden pruning lavender and soaking in the peace. The garden, like me, had been neglected while I catered to David and Karen's demands. Now it was blooming again. By afternoon, the house was ready, fresh flowers on the table, a playlist of James's favorite jazz softly playing. Ethan arrived early, arranging fruit and cheese on a tray. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked, eyeing me in my new emerald green dress, a bold choice I'd never have made a year ago. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, smiling. "It's just dinner." We both knew it wasn't. This was the first time in months David, Karen, Sarah, Ryan, and a few of James's old friends, including Paul Carter, would be under my roof. The doorbell rang at 4:30 sharp. David and Karen stood on the porch, their smiles stiff. "Happy birthday, Mom," David said, handing me a generic bouquet. "You look different, Margaret," Karen said, her eyes scanning my dress, my neat updo, the subtle makeup I'd learned from a community center class. "Thank you," I said, stepping aside to let them in. Sarah and Ryan arrived next, then Paul and another couple, old friends of James and mine. I moved through greetings with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. At dinner, I caught David's eyes darting around the house, calculating. Karen kept glancing at a watercolor landscape I painted, now hanging in the dining room. "Did you redecorate, Margaret?" she asked, her tone implying it was a mistake. "Just a few touches," I said lightly. "I've been taking painting classes." "Painting," David said, as if I'd announced I was training for a marathon. "Grandma's got talent," Ethan said, his voice warm with pride. "She sold 3 pieces at the community art show." "Sold?" Karen's brow furrowed. "Why would you need to sell paintings?" I smiled. "It's not about need, Karen. It's about passion." An uneasy silence settled, broken by Ryan asking about Ethan's bookstore. "It's moving fast," Ethan said, grinning. "I've got a location picked out, thanks to Grandma's investment." David's head jerked up. "Investment? What's that supposed to mean?" Ethan held his gaze. "Grandma's backing my business plan." "With what money?" David's voice sharpened. "My money," I said quietly, but firmly. David opened his mouth, then glanced at the other guests and forced a smile. "Maybe we should talk about this later, Mom." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "I'm making my own decisions now." Sarah jumped in, sharing a story about their Smoky Mountains honeymoon, funded by my gift. The tension eased, but I could feel David's frustration simmering. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee and pie, Karen cornered me in the kitchen. "Margaret, what's going on with you?" she hissed. "First you balk at the honeymoon, then you ghost us for months, and now you're throwing money at Ethan's little fantasy." "It's not a fantasy," I said evenly. "It's a solid plan, and I'm supporting his dream." She scoffed. "Don't be foolish. Bookstores barely break even. He's taking advantage of you." "No, Karen, I'm investing in my grandson's future." "There's a difference." Her eyes narrowed. "David and I have been talking. This house is too much for you alone. Pine Grove has nice condos, and selling this place could benefit everyone." There it was, the plan Ethan had warned me about, now out in the open. "This house isn't for sale," I said firmly, "and my living situation isn't up for debate." Before she could reply, David appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said, picking up the blueberry pie I'd baked. "Let's have dessert." In the living room, as I sliced the pie, David cleared his throat, addressing the room. "Before we wrap up, Karen and I want to talk about something. We're worried about Mom's recent choices, spending recklessly, pulling away from family, ignoring our advice." The stunned silence fell. Paul Carter raised an eyebrow, but I stayed calm, my hand steady on the knife. David pressed on. We think it's time to consider a power of attorney for her own protection. The room froze. Ethan's jaw tightened and Sarah looked down, embarrassed. I set the knife down, meeting David's gaze. My decisions are my own, David, and I'm far from needing anyone's protection. If you're worried about my finances, maybe you should look at your own choices, like assuming my money's yours to spend. Karen's face reddened. That's not what we meant, isn't it? I said, my voice calm but cutting. You've made it clear what you value, but this is my house, my life, and my future, and I'm done letting you dictate any of it. Paul cleared his throat, his lawyer's tone smooth but firm. Margaret's perfectly capable, David. I'd be careful about suggesting otherwise. David opened his mouth, then closed it, his face a mix of anger and defeat. The rest of the evening passed in strained politeness, but I felt lighter than I had in years. After the guests left, Ethan stayed to help clean up. You handled that like a pro, Grandma, he said, grinning. I'm learning, I said, smiling back, and I'm just getting started. Paul Carter set his coffee mug down with a deliberate clink, his eyes narrowing at David. That's a bold move, David. Got any evidence Margaret's not in her right mind? She's throwing money at Ethan's bookstore dream in the age of e-readers, David said, as if it were proof of insanity. And she's refusing practical options, like downsizing this house. A strange calm settled over me. This moment had been coming since I first started saying no. Your mother seems perfectly shocked to me, Paul said evenly. Making choices you don't like isn't the same as incapacity. You don't get it, David snapped, his voice rising. She always leaned on Dad, then me, for financial advice. Now she's making these reckless decisions out of nowhere. Enough. I set the pie knife down, my voice steady. I'm not reckless, David. For years, I've funded your home upgrades, vacations, cars, and Sarah's wedding. I let you treat me like a blank check instead of your mother. That ends now. David's face turned beet red. So this is your plan, he said, gesturing around the table. Humiliate us in front of everyone. Paint us as the bad guys. I met his gaze. You've done it yourselves. You selfish old woman, he hissed, shoving his chair back so hard it wobbled. After all we've done for you. Karen grabbed his arm, suddenly aware of the other guest's stares, but David was too far gone. Dad would be disgusted with you. Paul cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Actually, David, James foresaw this exact scenario. The room went silent. David froze, his mouth half open as Paul pulled a familiar envelope from his jacket. James added a codicil to his will before he passed, Paul said, addressing the stunned guests. He worried about how Margaret would be treated after he was gone. What kind of codicil? Karen demanded, her voice sharp. Paul glanced at me, seeking permission. I nodded. It states that any descendant who publicly disrespects Margaret forfeits their inheritance, he said calmly. That includes belittling her, trying to control her money against her wishes, or pushing her out of her home. That's absurd. David sputtered. Dad would never. He did, Paul interrupted. And as executor, I've been keeping tabs on incidents over the past few months. He turned to me. Margaret, do you want to enforce the codicil? All eyes locked on me. David and Karen looked pale, their shock turning to dread. Sarah seemed embarrassed, her eyes on her plate. Ethan's gaze was steady, full of quiet support. Yes, I said, my voice clear. I do. David sank back into his chair. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, I said. The name tag at the wedding, the honeymoon stumped-up brunch, the constant demands, and now this trying to declare me incompetent. It's over. Our inheritance. Karen whispered, her voice breaking. Forfeit, Paul confirmed. All of it. What about Sarah and Ryan? Karen asked, desperation creeping in. They didn't do anything. Paul glanced at his notes. Sarah was present at several incidents but didn't actively participate. However, she also didn't defend Margaret. Sarah's eyes welled up. I'm so sorry, Grandma. I should have said something about the name tag. I reached for her hand across the table. We all make mistakes, sweetheart. It's what you do next that matters. So what now? Ryan asked, his arm around Sarah. Paul adjusted his glasses. At the codicil, David and Karen's share is redistributed. Half goes to Margaret outright. The other half is split among descendants who have shown her respect and care. All eyes turn to Ethan, who looks stunned. I didn't know about this, he said quickly. Grandma, I swear, I know, I said, smiling. Your grandfather would be proud of the man you're becoming. David stood again, his face twisted with rage. This is a setup. You let us think the money was there for the taking. No, David, I said softly. You assumed, you demanded, but you never asked what I needed or wanted. I'll fight this in court, he growled. You can try, Paul said coolly. The codicil's airtight, and we have plenty of evidence. Margaret, please, Karen said, her voice suddenly sweet. We're family. We can work this out. It's too late for that, I said, standing to face them. After everything I've done for you, I'm finally standing up for myself. There's a difference. The gathering fizzled out soon after. Sarah and Ryan left with quiet apologies and promises to stay in touch. David and Karen stormed out without a word. Paul and the other guests made polite exits, leaving Ethan and me in the quiet house. You okay? Ethan asked, stacking dessert plates. I smiled, feeling a weight lift. I'm free. A year later, I stood in the doorway of Pages and Brew, Ethan's bookstore, housed in a charming brick building in the heart of town. Sunlight poured through the windows, warming shelves lined with books and cozy reading nooks. A coffee bar, run by Ethan's girlfriend, Lily, served local roasts and fresh muffins. In the children's corner, a mural I'd painted a vibrant meadow with hidden birds and rabbits delighted young readers. Twice a week, I hosted story time, something I'd never imagined myself doing a year ago. Upstairs, a small apartment had been renovated for a writer-in-residence program Ethan started with part of his inheritance. The bell above the door jingled, and Sarah stepped in, pushing a stroller with her 4-month-old son, Jamie, named for his great-grandfather. Grandma, Sarah called, spotting me. Didn't know you'd be here. Just dropping off some bookmarks I painted, I said, peeking at Jamie. Hello, little man. Over the past year, Sarah and I had rebuilt our bond. After the codicil shock, she made real efforts to connect independent of her parents. Ryan had been a steady influence, encouraging her to stand on her own. David and Karen, though, were another story. After failing to challenge the codicil legally, they'd moved to Arizona for David's new job in real estate. We exchanged stiff holiday cards, but little else. Talked to Mom and Dad lately, I asked as Sarah settled at a cafe table with Jamie. She sighed. Mom called last week. Same old gripes, Dad's job. Their small condo, how unfair it all is. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, Sarah said firmly. They made their choices. I'm making mine. Lily brought over coffee and scones, cooing at Jamie before heading back to the counter. I watched Sarah, her face softer now, and felt a quiet pride. Not everyone in the family had changed, but some had learned. And I'd learned, too, about my own strength, my own worth. As I stepped outside into the warm afternoon, the bookstore sign glinted above me. Pages and Brew. A new chapter for Ethan, for Sarah, for me. James would have loved it. Ethan stepped up from the storeroom, arms full of new books, his face brightening when he saw us. Perfect timing, he said, sliding into a chair at our cafe table. I've got an idea I want to run by you both. He laid out his plan to expand Pages and Brew's community outreach free literacy classes for adults, creative writing workshops for teens, maybe even a book club for seniors. It'll mean putting some profits back into the business, he said, his eyes alive with excitement, but I think it could make a real difference. It's brilliant, I said, a wave of pride washing over me as Ethan and Sarah dove into the details: scheduling, volunteers, local partnerships. I looked around the sunlit bookstore. The shelves brimmed with stories, the coffee bar hummed with quiet chatter, and my meadow mural glowed in the children's corner. This place wasn't just Ethan's dream, it was a new beginning for all of us. In the years since the codicil revelation, I'd rediscovered parts of myself I'd let fade. I'd made new friends through my watercolor classes, sold a few paintings at local galleries, and started traveling weekend getaways to the Blue Ridge Mountains at first, then a 3-week trip to New England with a senior travel group. There, I'd met Henry, a widower from Philadelphia with a warm laugh and a love for jazz, who now called me every Sunday to trade stories and plan our next adventure. James would have smiled at all of it, not just the bookstore or my independence, but the boundaries I'd set. His codicil had been a safety net, but I'd learned to stand on my own. Little Jamie let out a delighted squeal, pulling me back to the moment. Sarah adjusted his blanket, smiling softly. This was my family now, not perfect, not whole, but honest. We were piecing together something new from the ashes of old expectations. What do you think, Grandma? Ethan asked, leaning forward. I looked at him, at Sarah, at Jamie, the future in a tiny knit cap, and at the bookstore, built on trust and dreams instead of greed. I think, I said, my voice warm, this is exactly where we're meant to be.